Did you know that by 2050, climate-induced disasters could cost the global economy a staggering $2.5 trillion every single year? Yet despite these looming threats, a significant gap remains in how organizations report on climate risks, and both the public and private sectors need to get this right to address these threats. While 72% of companies have developed climate action plans, and that of course is a good thing, less than 50% are effectively reporting on the financial resources required to implement those strategies. This gap in accurate reporting leaves businesses around the globe vulnerable to unanticipated risks and disasters. The need for a standardized, robust framework to assess, report, and mitigate these risks has never been more critical, ensuring that businesses are not only compliant, but resilient in the face of growing climate challenges. Hello, I am your host, Mike Lake, and in today's episode of Preview of Tomorrow, I will be talking with Chiara Rinaldi, co-founder of Sustainaccout, a company providing the tools and insights necessary for businesses to navigate the complexities of climate risk reporting.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Chiara. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome, of course, to all of you, our listeners and viewers. I'm excited to introduce you to Chiara Rinaldi. She is the co-founder of Sustainaccout, a company that helps businesses understand the potential impacts of climate change on their operations. Chiara, let's start by just learning a little bit about your own background and what motivated you to address the critical challenge of assessing and mitigating climate risks.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for having me. So there are many solutions out there to reduce climate change. However, we are slow. We are very slow in implementing solutions. So that's why we not only need to make sure that we reduce emissions, but we also have to get ready for the climate change that is going to happen. And that's why we started Sustainaccout.
You know, I feel like climate has obviously become a banner issue for the world. And I mean, it's not good to have any threats to humanity, but it's good that we're all united finally. Well, not maybe all, but many of us are united around the existence of this challenge. But I feel like even with the awareness that has happened in recent years, there is still very much a failure for many organizations to accurately report and mitigate climate risks, and that has led to incredible losses. I mean, some estimate $1.3 trillion annually by 2030 or more, and that's driven by this increased frequency of natural disasters, supply chain disruptions, everything that we're already seeing today. Can you give me a sense of just how extensive is this problem and why does it even exist?
So you're very right. We tend to hope that what can happen, which we're aware that it can happen, but it can happen somewhere else or to someone else and not to us. But at the end, it happens to someone. And so the damage is piling up. So we need to make sure that everybody not only is aware, but actually starts to act. Because if we're talking about physical assets, we're talking about something that cannot be changed overnight. We need some preparation. We need to be, make sure to have the finances to implement all these things. So we need to start acting well in advance, but we see this problem as very far away. And this is where the issue is.
It's something I refer to as the immunity syndrome.
Yeah,
we all see the problem, but everybody thinks themselves or their business or their community is immune to it. But we know that's not true. And, this lack of comprehensive climate reporting can really lead to, inadequate risk assessments and understanding kind of the vulnerabilities that your organization, your community, whatever it is, might be facing. And I know that 25% of companies report significant losses due to those unanticipated climate-related events. In a perfect world, what would be the easy answer to this? How do we get over that?
Yes, and if you allow me, actually, we tend also to underestimate them because we tend to think about the physical damage, but
Right.
not about the rest. And the rest is big. If we think about, let's say, heat waves, we think that heat waves is not a big deal, right? The building will still be there. But what about the people that work there? Will they be productive? Can they work there? Can we still produce in that building if it's a production facility? So all these costs are absolutely underestimated.
Well, you just made me think of something else, not just the building itself. What about the supply chain that needs
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's not something you can control yourself, but understanding the risk associated with that, and heat being one example, but I mean the intensity increase and frequency of these storms that we've been seeing, whether it's flooding or, I mean, shipments, through hurricanes or whatever, typhoons, whatever it might be. The disruption is, there's no lack of disruption, let's put it that way. So, in the end, when companies fail to properly report climate risks, there's actually not just that lack of understanding of their own vulnerability, but there's also potential penalties they may face, right?
Absolutely.
I saw a survey that said 29% of surveyed firms indicated that they had already incurred fines or reputational damage because they weren't compliant with their reporting standards.
Yeah. I remember back then when I've been working in sustainability for a long time, and back then there were a lot of discussion about the duty of the investors of making sure that there is only money coming back, right? That's the main duty of the investors, and that luckily has shifted. But we are still facing. Like with physical climate risk, it's exactly that point. So we are going to incur in costs, financial costs that are absolutely underestimated. The companies don't take that into account and start doing something about that.
This is where the work you've been doing is so critical. It's critical in its impact to communities, but it's also critical in its impact to the organizations that use Sustainaccout. Can you tell us a little bit about Sustainaccout itself?
Yes. So at Sustainaccout, we really focus on climate resilience. So we want to make sure that the assets, the real assets, so buildings, factories, warehouses, and so on, can stand the climate that we will have in 10, 20, 50 years from now. So our mission is really to make sure that companies, public administration, investors are aware of those risks and can act now to make sure that their assets can withstand those risks.
And so dive a little deeper into this for me. So if I'm a company or a government or any organization, how do I make use of and really leverage the opportunities that Sustainaccout offers?
Yeah, so it's very simple. We have a software solution. So this allows for easy use, but also for a lower cost compared to a consultancy firm. Of course, each has its own role. But so it's enough to have the locations of these assets, And if we want to go a little bit deeper, we can collect also information about the building itself. So what is, what is structure, the facade, the roof, and so on. And we use all this information to make sure that not only we know the risks of that location, but actually we can assess what the impact could be on that asset. And from there, of course, we can derive very specific adaptation measures that allow to prepare for the future.
So just buying the software is, I'm assuming, not enough, right? What setup does an organization need to do to be able to use the software?
Well, really, it's not much. It's the access. It's a web-based tool, so the access can be done with a browser, and the information can be either entered manually or uploaded in bulk for portfolios or a group of assets, and from there, basically the adaptation measures, so the intervention that can be done, can be derived together with a detailed report on what risks and what consequences.
So can you give me an example of an organization that could be using it and how they're using it, and what they're experiencing?
Yes. So let's, for instance, talk about real estate, right? In a city, we have a lot of buildings. They're a bit different areas. Some may be close to a river, some may be close to a green area, and so on. So the close environment where these assets are influence the risk assessment. And so with all that information, so company that develops real estate comes in with addresses or coordinates of location, upload that information, and can already derive a first overview of which risk those locations are facing. Mm. And from there, you can go deeper, especially where there is higher risk, upload more information about those assets, and get specific results on what the risk is, quantified also in financial terms, and what can be done. And so these companies can, if they are building new buildings, can already incorporate directly, but also if they are renovating, maybe, energy efficiency measures and so on, they can directly incorporate also those considerations for physical climate risk.
And when you talk about uploading information, this is information that they already have readily available?
Absolutely. It's very simple information, how many floors, what's the shape of the roof, the facade. So very, very simple information.
It's we've often heard that, data is the oil of this next century, and references like that. This is a tool that actually puts that data to use. And it's amazing to me that this is not a no-brainer for more organizations. What do you think is, the hesitation that somebody might have, and why they should not have it?
The hesitation comes from the fact that it's something not that tangible, let's put it this way. So people don't know exactly, yes, there is risk, there are maps, maybe with flooding areas, maybe we can look at that, but what does that mean? So it's a bit difficult to understand, and we try to make it more tangible.
I mean, it's an amazing potential impact that kind of information, turning that data into valuable information for organizations, can really have. Can you paint a picture, for tomorrow, for an organization, whether it's a government or private sector or whatever, if they were to implement Sustainaccout today, what might be the impact they start seeing? It might not be as early as tomorrow, but in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the short term, they can somehow be reassured that what they are building makes sense for the future. because when we're talking about real assets, it's not for 1 or 2 years, right? We're talking about long term. So make sure that they are putting their money into something that is going to stay there and stay valuable, can be still used in the future. And so I think in the short term, the benefit is really this peace of mind that something is there to stay. And also, of course, there are regulations that ask for more transparency on climate risk, and you need to report on that. So that is, of course, also a benefit.
And no small benefit, I might add.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite questions, and it's hard to believe that we're already at time, but I like to end each episode with this, looking 25, 50 years into the future, and assuming that every organization in the world is using Sustainaccout to better assess and mitigate their risks. Paint us that picture. What does the world look like because of that access to the information, the valuable information that Sustainaccout provides?
Yes, absolutely. And that's actually the perfect time frame for us. If we think about 25, 50 years from now, that's exactly the time frame where we are talking for a building, for a real asset. And the way I want to see that is that, our cities, since we're talking also about cities, our cities can still be lived. Because what I'm afraid is that they will not be able to be lived anymore, too hot, too dry, flooded, and so on. And instead, we can prepare now to make sure that we can still live in our cities in the way that we are living today or better.
Well, at Leading Cities, we couldn't concur more. I want to underline, emphasize, exclamation points on that very important note, because whether it's climate change or sea level rise, and of course it's all related naturally. These are real threats to cities. Sea level rise alone. 95% of the world's cities are coastal cities. So when you talk about water rising, we're not yet equipped to live underwater.
Not yet, exactly. We're trying, but we're not there.
Not there yet. So we really do have to understand these vulnerabilities. We have to do something to mitigate these risks if we are gonna call these communities home for the long term. So on that note, I want to thank you for that work that you're doing. The truth is, we can so easily look past the value of data and the importance of understanding it and utilizing that data to be valuable information for decision making and the rest. So I really applaud you and the whole team at Sustainaccout for making this information and leveraging the data that's out there in such a way that does make our communities and organizations more resilient to the changes that we're facing and the threats that we're facing. So it's been a pleasure to have you here on Preview of Tomorrow. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you very much, Mike.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.